Okay, another blind reacts looking at this Kurt Cobain story, looking at his life. If you remember, we kind of were trying to define or set his personality within the context of someone who's more of an idealist. That person, and specifically for Kurt, he could be introverted. That means he's private, reserved, uncomfortable with the fame, um, and prefers small circles. Intuitive, so sort of creative and abstract in terms of thinking, and more focused on emotions rather than details. Feeling in the moment kind of guy. Spontaneous, go with the flow. And then in terms of feeling, deeply empathetic, sensitive to social issues and personal struggles. He talked about a song that he wrote, a couple songs that he wrote on gender issues, and talked a little bit in previous videos about some of the foundations that he was working with in order to raise awareness. I think he said they raised like $50,000 to raise awareness for abuse against women, and a specific type of abuse that he mentioned. And then perceptive, in that he is open-minded, spontaneous, and really rigid to or resistant to rigid structures. In previous interviews, he was very specific to, well, he had an attitude is what he had when you start talking about the industry and losing motivation to do what you're doing. A lot of those things were targeted at the industry, and he would say sarcastic things like, well, I'm a big rock star now, and this is what rock stars do, and just little jabs at the industry, not trying to be overt about it, but more so trying to be covert in a way. But at the beginning of one of the interviews, he was more so overt in that in the very beginning of the interview, the young lady asked him, she asked him, what books have you read before? And he said, well, I read this book and I keep it with me all the time. And he said, essentially, the individual was trying to get away from people bothering them all the time. And he said, I can kind of relate to that. So that was kind of hilarious. But here is another interview, and I also noted in previous interviews that he some of the interviews, when he would do them by himself, of course, in one example of the previous interview, he talked about how the group was going in a different direction. He would say, we are going in a different direction, but I believe that he was actually talking about himself, or what he wanted to do. His intent was to go this direction with the music. And so here he is again by himself. One of the biggest things was, man, apparently he was larger than life, and he was very uncomfortable with that. He wanted to be famous, but he didn't want to be a rock star, and that sort of catapulting into that status is what made him really uncomfortable, gave him a lot of it was a source of a lot of anxiety for him, and so he just really rejected that sort of the establishment that would structure him as this thing that he did not want to be, that would make him write music like he didn't want to write. So here we go.
We wanted to have a title that related to the good majority of the themes that are on the album, which are mostly medical themes, sickness and death and rebirth and having to be restrained in a bed with an IV in your arm and being sick all the time. I for some reason see connection between death and life and being sick all the time, and I'm just kind of obsessed with it, so I had to get it out of my system.
I don't understand the part about, I can see the relationship between life and death, but I don't see the middle of being sick all the time. There could have been anything put in that slot. Why being sick all the time? We know that he, in a later interview that I'll sort of review, he was sick. He had some pain in his stomach. So I'm not sure if at this point he started to experience, and again, I didn't follow the guy when I grew up. I just knew of him when I was growing up. I was very young. And so I really don't know everything, or so I'm really blind. This is really a blind react. But that could be that specific issue according to what he's going through. Number one. Number two, I'm noticing that in this interview, this was in '93, so a year before the interview that we just looked at. I think the interview that we just looked at was it from '94. This is from '93, and so just a year earlier, he seems much lighter. He seems like he has a little bit more life in him. Whereas in the '94 uh, interview that I reviewed, he looked sort of lifeless. He looked totally defeated, um, and he had been. It looked like he had been absolved in a way. He had absolved himself of caring or of the energy or the fervor for life. And so here, he's actually engaged with the conversation. Um, his face looks a little bit more colorful. Um, looks a little bit more lively.
I would say it's more biographical of the way I felt a few years ago.
Mm.
To tell you the truth, it's not really as personal as a lot of people would like it to be. Um, I actually had some themes on this album that don't have anything to do with my life at all. So, in a way, yeah, for a few songs. I kind of envy people at times who are blissfully happy, and a lot of those people aren't bothered with the complications of knowledge and everything else.
There it is.
I kind of envy people in a way, yeah, for a few songs. I kind of envy people don't have anything to do with my life at all. So, in a way, yeah, for a few songs. I kind of
I'm rewinding that part because in a previous interview, he talked about how, as a poet, he would just write. At that time, in the '94 interview, at that time, he was talking about how he had basically ran out of motivation, and it was most like it was he was really attributing it to, in a very covert way, he was attributing it to the establishment sort of taking away his motivation and inspiration. But and so he was using the book that he mentioned as inspiration because it felt like he felt like it was very biographical in a way of what he was going through. But here, uh, he talks a little bit about
envy people that don't have anything to do with my life at all.
how those songs don't really have anything to do with his life because he mentioned that people were saying that these songs were biographical or autobiographical or what have you, um, about his life. But he was saying, "Look, man, I'm just writing poetry, and um, it really has nothing to do. It doesn't have anything to do with anything." It's kind of what he was saying. So this is him saying it here more concretely.
So, in a way, yeah, for a few songs. I kind of envy people at times who are blissfully happy, and a lot of those people aren't bothered with the complications of knowledge and everything else that life has to offer. You know, I know a lot of people who are simpletons. You know, they're very simple that they can enjoy their lives and be totally happy and secure with, just watching sports on television and having a beer every once in a while. You know, so and I've always felt too complicated, so I kind of envy those people. And I'm not saying that I'm smarter than most people. It's
Right,
just that
right.
I I'm too sensitive, and I just I wish sometimes I could just enjoy the simple things in life, and just not forget about everything else.
The problem with um, that we might see with there in the Bible, when you get to the the Proverbs and you get to Ecclesiastes, there is a contrast, and they attribute um, the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes to King Solomon. The issue or the contrast with Proverbs is that Proverbs is full of wisdom. Look at, young man, don't do this, or people should do this, or this is what wisdom is defined as. More upbeat. But when we get to Ecclesiastes, like it's more pessimistic, um, because the sort of scholars talk about how King Solomon had transitioned from a point of sort of optimism in his life or happiness in his life to a more pessimistic view because of knowledge. You remember, if you know anything about the Bible, you would remember that King Solomon asked God for wisdom and he got it. But the problem with wisdom is that it's great, but the problem with wisdom is that you know. Knowing is painful because when you see things happen, you see the downfall and the pitfalls that people walk into, and you see how people are willingly doing things in the world that sort of compromise the goodness or the benefit to others, and it overwhelms you because
that life has to offer. I know a lot of people.
and he talks about these people who are unbothered by things of life. They don't seem weighed down. Well, there's one thing, one first thing. Um, you have to be careful when you're looking at other people's lives from the outside. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what they're showing to you. And that's a common mistake that I think a lot of individuals make when it looks like people are doing good. Maybe they're genuinely doing good, but the problem is that you didn't see them when they were doing bad, right? Or which is oftentimes I think the case, because a lot of times people go through cycles. I don't care who you are, you go through cycles of ups and downs. And when you believe that, everybody is getting ahead except you, the world is crumbling around you, you begin to look at other people and say, he's happy. I remember, and I told this story on my podcast. I remember when I was living in Texas. Well, I'm from Texas, but I remember when I was living in Texas, and I was trying to get my degrees and stuff like that. And I was in this beat up car, man, and the car would stop at the light and it would cut off on me. So I had to keep my foot on the gas and on the brake at the same time to keep it from cutting off on me. And I remember looking over at the guy next to me in the BMW, and I said, man, he's probably got life figured out and this, and that, and the third, so on and so forth. And, you know, the truth is, I don't know what that guy was thinking or going through. He could have been on his way to the hospital to deal with the loss of a family member. So, you know what I mean? So we just don't know. But here he's saying, man, I think too much. I'm overcome with too much information about the world. And he's not claiming to be smarter. It's just he's overloaded with information about the world. And it's too much. It's a high source of anxiety because he believes that he's operating on a higher frequency. And he's trying to do everything that he can do to, resolve that. But, you know, people don't play ball. People are not going to just jump and say, oh, yeah, absolutely, Kurt, we're going to stop everything that we're doing. If we're doing people wrong, we're going to stop doing people wrong or whatever, because you're right. They know you're right. They just don't care because they are feeding what they want, right? What they need. And it doesn't always have to be evil. It's just we all have different things that we want and desire. And that's what he's running up against. His view of the world, and how he sees people doing wrong by that view, and other people saying, Kurt, I think you need to stay out of my business. So,
Or simpletons, they're very simple, but they can enjoy their lives and be totally happy and secure with, just watching sports on television and having a beer every once in a while. So, and I've always felt too complicated, so I kind of envy those people. And I'm not saying that I'm smarter than most people. It's just that I'm too sensitive, and I wish sometimes I could just enjoy the simple things in life, and just not forget about everything else.
He doesn't think he's too sensitive. He just thinks that people don't understand him. And a lot of times this is how individuals like him feel. They feel like they're kind of like this genius that nobody understands. And it gets tough. It gets difficult, and it gets very frustrating because when you talk, people just don't understand you. And so you feel like, am I going crazy? Because people don't, is it me? You know what I mean? So
I'm a great father.
Damn it.
Aren't I? No, I love my child. It's really fun. Really fun. I had no idea. Yeah, it has. It's made me a lot more positive, you know. I have I have a goal now, you know. I have a child to raise, and so that gives me more reason to want to live, you know.
No, it didn't. It did not at all. Unfortunately, because we know a year later that things changed, and I said that in my previous analysis, he was grasping at straws to try to find a reason to live, and his daughter and his family and his wife were good things. He acknowledged that, and those were supposed to be reasons to live because that's what society says. So you see how crazy that is? He's trying to disconnect from society in terms of I don't like the establishment, but yet he's trying to make himself happy according to societal standards. And I'm not criticizing him, but I think that because when you get trapped in the system, you don't know up from down. You know, you get really confused. And I'm not saying that it was a mistake to get married and have a child. I just think that he needed to better understand himself and his needs in order to communicate that effectively to his spouse at the time. Because when you don't say anything and you feel like you're in some sort of vortex and you're talking to yourself, then you know it becomes extremely frustrating, almost to the point to where you get this ringing inside of your head when you're trying to explain something and you're explaining yourself over and over again, and you're just like, hey yo, I'm about to snap. You know, so I think that's where he is here. He's very calm and under the surface, but there's a lot of frustrations. And when you notice, and last thing, when you notice that he was talking about his daughter, he's like, yeah, I have a goal now. I have to live. Yo, like he's not even excited about that. And come on, you know, and I'm not saying that he doesn't love his daughter and his spouse. What I'm saying is he's tired. He's extremely tired. He's like, that's supposed to give me a reason to live. And I tried this and I tried that. And essentially, I'm at my wits' end with trying things. Nothing's working. I'm doing everything that I think is supposed to work. Nothing's working. Very sad reality. But that's the video. Let me know what you think. Those of you who are fans and know this story better and know him better, like, share, subscribe. And until next time, that's the video. Take it easy.